Welcome to Alabama Manufacturing Now, hosted by Alabama Technology Network, a podcast where we cover a wide array of challenges, solutions, and innovations for manufacturers.
We're your host, Whitney Barlow, Supplier Development Manager.
And I'm Paige Caulfield, Marketing and PR Manager.
Hey, welcome back to Alabama Manufacturing Now. We're here today with our guest, Jean Pleasure, a longtime friend of ATN and owner and principal of ProAdvance LLC. Hey, Jean, how are things?
Oh, thanks. Everything is great.
Good.
Couldn't be better.
Good.
We appreciate you coming here and being with us today. We're just going to jump right into it, if you don't mind. Jean, tell us what ProAdvance is and what is your role there? What is it? What do you do?
ProAdvance is a company that I started back in July. It's at the end of a long series of classes and teaching that I'd done at UTC, and for myself, teaching supply chain certification courses. ProAdvance is just my business doing that, and that is what I do now currently.
Okay, so you mentioned supply chain. How long have you been in supply chain or teaching supply chain?
Well, I've been teaching it for about 3 years now, but I grew up in a warehouse.
Okay.
And so I did every kind of job in a warehouse you could ever imagine as a young man, and ended up being a graphic designer. So I was a while later, and still doing that. I've got about 35 years in that. So marketing, product development, all things that go along with that. And I've been in procurement for 16 and a half years. So over my whole life is kind of a supply chain.
Okay. And for those who are listening in, go in and tell us exactly what is supply chain and why is it important?
Well, supply chain is the conversion of raw materials into some product that you buy. Supply chain is a really overarching term. Lots of people hear supply chain and think you're just talking about purchasing and buying.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But that's just one very small portion. You're actually addressing the flow of raw material, maybe mined in South America and end up as a car in Japan. It's from end to end. Operations, flow, logistics, all of those things, that is what supply chain is. And the money, the finance, return logistics, like when you buy stuff at Target and it ain't right, you have to carry it back. There's a whole supply chain for that, getting it back,
I hadn't even thought about that.
Like about that either.
The backwards.
Yeah.
It's called reverse supply chain, and it's a big deal. It costs a lot of money. You have to plan for that, right? So sometimes even if you order something on Amazon and it's not right, then you call them and say, this is wrong. They say, well, just keep it. We'll send you another one. It costs more to send it back and for them to deal with it.
That is interesting.
I like when that happens because it's very rare, but you're like, hey, it's a twofer. I got this and that. And there are some companies that struggle in the return supply chain process.
That's right. And it's important to them for their customer, what their customers demand also. So if their returns aren't good, if you can't do business with them, what are you going to do? You're going to go to somebody that can.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I didn't even think about that. And with supply chain, you also have the whole quality aspect of it because you've got to worry about each step and how you're going to. That's a lot.
It's very deep. There in the classes in CPIM, for example, there's strategy, S&OP, demand, supply, detailed schedules. It's a very deep process to know all those things.
What's CPIM?
Certified in production and inventory management. It's one of the certifications in ASCM, APICS.
Okay.
It's a supply chain certification, basically within the walls of your company.
Huh. Well, okay, so on the notes of walls in your companies and certifications, what do you think are skills that are needed to be successful in supply chain management? So not just necessarily supply chain, but like the leadership part.
That's a dear subject to me because I have been on a program where I was trying to incorporate process improvement, where management was not bought in. They said they were, but they were not really. So you do all this work on process.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we're going to incorporate lean or whatever methodology that you use. But if the management guys aren't really bought in on it, then it won't work.
Right.
Right. So that's what this whole is about, because supply chain leadership, those guys have to understand how important it is that their strategic plan, their mission, their values, they have to really know what their company's about and why, so that you can transpose that down to the leadership staff and the middle managers, and it works its way all the way through your organization, so everybody knows where you're headed.
So what is your the number one skill do you think that would be successful when you're teaching supply chain?
Well, it depends on which specialty, because there's 100 specialties within everything that I said. So it depends on exactly what. Now, from a leadership, from an upper management perspective, just understanding how important it is to be aligned with everybody through the organization. Because I think it's probably fair to say that company leaders may or may not understand fully the effect. They have to deal with the finance and what the bottom line is, but understanding how their strategic plan is affecting everything down the line.
I guess so. I guess that would make sense on skills, is if you are focused on the bottom line and where the money's coming from or going,
Right.
And you don't understand the process of the chain, then you notice the bleeding, but you can't figure out the bleeding. And then I guess if you're not in tune with those individuals and in that department and that skill set, then there's like this disconnect.
Yes.
And so how in your past have you seen that, trying to insert those skills and make that connection happen?
Well, one of the first classes I took at Georgia Tech, the first thing she said is you have to have executive buy-in or you will not be successful. And I thought, well, I'm here. I had that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the executives have to understand and have some framework of understanding so that they really understand the impact and how important it is, not only in the short term. Okay, so once you spend the time necessary to understand what your company's about and your mission statement, which is your act, what's present, and the values that your company is going to stand for. Once you do that, then moving your way to the plant floor, everybody from top to bottom understands this is what my company stands for. Here's our values. This is what we're going to do. This is what our customers want. This is what our suppliers want. It aligns everybody together. Has to start from the top.
Got it.
So that kind of answered my last question, or my next question, excuse me. But, my question was, does a company's supply chain have a strategic importance to it? And if so, how so?
Well, I've been talking about operations the whole time inside the plant. Well, it also works on the sales side as well. Had a conversation with a colleague this morning in Atlanta, and it was talking about the challenges that they were facing from the sales side. So they're trying to, if their strategic plan is right and they have that aligned, then the salespeople know what they need to be selling, not just anything that they can, because that does not help them. It doesn't align with what they're trying to do as a company.
So how do you think AI is impacting supply chain?
Oh, that's a great question, and I appreciate that you brought it up. AI, I believe, it is changing the landscape, not only of supply chain, but everything going on around us right now. ERP systems are that's not the right word, but they are intent in sinking many millions of dollars to incorporate generative AI within their within their systems. So it's like, okay, put this much inventory here and do this, and what's the best way to maybe to route things and to place strategic assets in in the right places. I think it's paramount for anybody in business, especially in manufacturing, to be paying really close attention to that. You have to factor that in to your strategic plan, to your long-term goals. Any of us know what that's going to be, even in a year. Look, Gemini from Google was released a week ago. They already have a pro version of that now that's like many, many times stronger. It's no telling what it's going to be in a year. So how does that impact what you're doing, right? So I'm consulting, a company in Atlanta, and that's one of the things that's part of that we've got to look at. How as best you can, you got to factor that in. It's changing everything.
So do you think it's got a predictability on it? Like, do you see it using the supply chain with that? For example, just about all my Christmas was bought on Amazon because I work and that's just easy, right? And so every time I purchase, every time I buy, it's going recorded in inventory. It is because people get credit for things when you buy it from them. So there's this inventory being collected of what's being purchased. So do you think AI, I've seen a lot of articles where you have the predictability. These are the things we need to order more of. And do you think AI will improve that, hinder that?
It'll know what you're doing.
It already knows what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Definitely already knows.
If my phone was in here when I got out, my watch is on, so probably all of my ads will be geared towards AI now.
Well, Walmart and Amazon and a lot of the big box, retailers that have control of their supply chain, they're integrated. They're already, big data, machine learning, all of those technologies are working in their distribution centers. So they're already collecting all the data, and we see examples of this every day. I mean, we talk about something, and all of a sudden it shows up on your phone.
Right.
Yeah. So when AI gets dropped into that for real, then it's probably going to turn into a more predictive analytics scenario where they'll know what you're doing before you do.
Yeah, well, I feel like that's already happened.
It is.
Yeah.
You just said a word that I hear a lot, and sometimes there are some words I know, and sometimes I learn, like my children do, by a word association, but integrated supply chain. So that leads me to think that if there's integrated supply chain, there's other types of supply chain. So can you elaborate on those different kinds of supply chain?
Well, integration is just a descriptor. But you have service supply chains, you have nonprofit supply chains, like UNICEF, or there's
Okay.
There are a lot of different kinds, but integration just means it's all connected.
Okay.
Right. So depending on what supply chain you're talking about, when I say integration, that just means everybody's tied together.
So we see a lot of that in automotive and aerospace industries. You have integrated supply chains because they're all through. They want to identify their third tier all the way up to their first tier because they're on a manufacturing facility and you're bringing the parts in as it's going down the line. So that's kind of important, I would think. Tell me a little bit about how people integrate into the supply chain.
Well, that's very, very important. So most initiatives are going to start with process. We're going to cut our inventory down. We're going to cut our costs down. We're going to do this. We're going to do that and try to save money. I believe in working it from culture backwards because your team on the floor at whatever level, they know more about what you're doing. It's really a lean concept and Kaizen concept. They know more about what's going on there. And if you encourage that and you make them feel part of it and give them part, because that's what everybody really wants. They want to be part of it, not, outside. That's the worst thing ever, to be out,
Yeah, being told what to do.
Yeah, just so... but understanding, and I mentioned ADKAR in my notes, being aware, having desire, knowledge, ability, reinforcement, those are really nice common sense approaches to your team. And going back to my original statement about if your strategic plan and your values is all set, then you can go and develop using AdCar to develop your staff and get everybody, lined up and pulling in the same direction.
So the culture, you talked about that. Culture is such one of those hot topic words that we hear so much these days. We hear it in every aspect of work and school, and it's almost like a buzzword in certain generations of the culture. But I would imagine that if you use strategic planning to help, really develop a culture around a strong supply chain, that somehow that's going to affect quality. And can you talk a little bit more about how quality is, like we get quality control. We understand kind of what that does, but where's that embedded in the supply chain?
Quality control, it's very common. I think, if you're having quality problems, you hire or you place somebody or a few people, we're going to do quality at this point. But Deming, I think, said it's quality at the source.
Yeah.
So if your staff's engaged, they should be, quality happens at every workstation. It's not something that you do at the end. So, and that holds true throughout the supply chain in its entirety. Quality at the source is paramount with that.
And I would think that goes back to your strategic plan with quality, is that if you're starting from the source and you go at each station, management at the top, do you feel like that management should go at each station and really understand what each station does to truly buy into the strategic plan?
Well, it's not maybe prudent. I mean, if you had a PPG or a DuPont, it's really impractical for that to happen. However, it is very important that they are involved and everybody sees involvement. Hey, integrity. They know if the management are doing what they say. If they're really bought in or are they just saying it. And really they're going to look to their manager that's in front of them. And if he's believing it as well, then that's going to, so it's not necessarily that they know every little thing is too much at a big company. There's no way. But if it's managed right through the ranks, then it again, that's why strategic planning is so important. That's the rudder that guides everyone throughout that supply chain, throughout that structure, to know what they should be doing and how.
So how are you? I think about a supply chain and I think about the floors I've been on, and you have the red lights and the green lights and the gauges and, all the things telling you what's going on the floor at any given time. And most of those, you'll see them on the actual line, but you'll also see like a dashboard somewhere in the main office where someone can walk by and at any given time know. And some flash and tell you why they're red, etc. But how in this strategic plan? So I don't come from the background of this type of strategic plan, but I have written plenty of strategic plan in my life. And you always like to kind of put in there little indicators to make sure that you're on the right path. What are some of those key performance indicators that you like to see, or those touch points that you think management needs to see to make sure their strategic plan is working effectively?
The most important is on time and full to your customer.
Okay.
It starts and ends there. So everything else revolves around that. If you're making your deliveries, number one, and keeping your customers happy, that is most important. Then working backwards from there, there's going to be particular parts of a manufacturing operation that are producing a certain item, and there's going to be KPIs directed exactly at that production rate. If there's standardized times and all that, so you can know whether you're keeping up with your production. But some are not so easily done. If you're a make-to-order company, then all that doesn't matter at all.
Right.
It's a completely different setup. So, again, if one overarching metric as far as that goes to me is on time and full, perfect order fulfillment, making sure the customers are getting what they want when they want it.
I guess you'd still have that concept when it's made to order is because if even though they're having a specialty order made, it still has a specific deadline. It still should be completed in the proper time.
That's right.
It should be fully what their expectation is. Is there processes in those indicators that you like to try and see a company put in place to kind of checks and balance itself? You know, we love that in this country. We love to checks and balance. And like, what are those? What do you see that? Because I mean, you have the indicator. We've already talked about the dashboards, and we have all this AI. But in a culture that you're trying to create, machines aren't always the best way to do it. It's got to also be an internal part in you. So, what are some of those things that you try to get to incorporate in the company? Would like to
transparency and communication.
Okay.
You know, that opens up if the operator of this particular resource is seeing things wrong or having problems, then, you know, transparency and being okay to approach your boss and say, hey, this isn't working. And in operations, people get in and see what's happening. And so that's kind of what I would look for.
Where do you have any examples of that where you might have worked with someone and seen it on both in the positive way where because saying that you're comfortable going to your boss and saying something's wrong is one thing. Actually going to your boss and telling them this isn't working and why are two totally different things.
Oh, yeah. Well, and wherever I've been, usually it's okay for to go and say, hey, this is wrong. I mean, you got to be at least that. But I think what I would be striving for if I were consulting, to go a step further and really get that team involved in developing the process even. I think that's where
it goes back to culture.
Right.
Developing the process. That's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
Is getting everybody involved in the process. Because you feel like you got an opinion. Well, you know you have an opinion. Let me clarify. You feel like your opinion's heard.
Yeah.
We all have an opinion.
And then over time, then it becomes, you get excited about, hey, I think we could do this better. And then over time, it really gets legs.
Process improvement.
But after culture, after strategic, that comes at the end.
So we talked a little bit about the skills needed for a supply chain manager, but what about those who are actually on the plant floor, on the assembly line? What kind of skills do they need?
Well,
anything.
And that's a great question. And that's what ASCM and Apex bring to the table with the certification study that I teach. Because you do not have to have a degree to do that. I'm actually teaching and mentoring a young man now who he doesn't have a degree. And I'll go on to say that at Supply Chain Mavens, who's the number one premier partner in the world with ASCM, and Joni and Marianne, my dear friends, they neither one have a degree. And they're teaching people all over the planet. Big companies or whatever. So the point that I'm making is that you can take this on and learn and grow and on your own. That's what I do. That's what I'm very passionate about, helping those people, because I was one of them.
Right. Okay. So any type of certifications or anything like that would help?
Yes, and there's several different levels. The certifications are like the pinnacle of that. So you can get on ASCM and join, and they have a foundations segment for those that you can take that for free and they get your feet wet. And then there are certificates that you can do, which are the next level. I have one in technology and procurement. And there's demand planning, warehousing, whatever. And then you have the certifications at the top. So there's a pathway for you to improve.
If I was brand new and I wanted to get into supply chain, how would that, what would I be looking for? Like, what part of the supply chain process am I looking for to have this certification, planning and inventory management?
Okay, CPIM is basically everything that's going on within the walls of your company.
Okay.
From a global perspective, you still, you have a strategy model. You talk about S&OP. You talk about demand, supply, detailed schedules, which has to do with planning and organizing your shop floor, inventory management, distribution, and quality and continuous improvement technology.
Okay.
So you're going to cover all those. It's 1,200 pages.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. my Meshva, my student and friend in Dallas, she has a PhD in industrial engineering, and she's a Scrum Master and PMP. She's the most credentialed person that I've ever taught, and she just passed this, but she was complaining at the depth of it. So you really learn actionable, but you know how to, if you're doing inventory, you know how to do inventory, or whether you're planning reorder points or moving distribution around 3 or 4 different distribution warehouses, and how do you change the safety stock? And there's a gazillion different things that you learn, actionable things. Even if you don't try to sit for the exam, you'll come away from that knowing it changes you. I mean, you know what it brings a confidence
Right.
with you that, like, I can handle anything. You may not be an expert on every single subject, because each one of those things I just named are all specialties within themselves.
Wow.
But you'd know who to ask, and you could ask an intelligent question about it. That's what I love about it, because the regular person who maybe feels like they didn't get to go to college, they had kids, they have all these things happening, and they can use that to really get educated. And this is the most recognized cert on the planet.
That's really cool. What about logistics? Again, they kind of explain themselves, but still, like, I didn't think about in the planning and inventory all the aspects of it. So what in logistics, transportation, and distribution?
Well, that's just specific to what it says. I do not teach that one. I'm not as familiar with that one because I don't work in the logistics world. I probably will get it just so I'll have it sometime, but I got too much to do right now. But
You just started your own company.
But I have others to do. But it's focused on warehousing and transportation and distribution. Like you were talking about a moment ago, moving things around and orienting.
Yeah, I bet a mother that has multiple kids in multiple sports would be a master at that class. Because I feel like I can land the planes at Hartselle during the summer when I'm trying to get everybody their locations and time. So maybe we're certified in that and just didn't know it. Okay, so what about supply management? What is that one?
Okay, that is like the pinnacle, and it's end to end.
Okay.
Okay, so there's about a third crossover between CPIM and CSCP. So during CSCP, you're talking about demand management and forecasting and global supply chain networks, sourcing, operations, forward and reverse logistics. It's just it's a different, higher level.
So tell me a little bit about I'm glad you hit that. So global supply chain.
Yep.
We are a country that became very dependent on the global supply chain, as most countries are. And we know that is a very vulnerable supply chain. So how do you see that? Like, so you're working with your own company. You've been in this classes and taught these classes and been in the certifications. What are people saying? Like, what is their mindset of the vulnerabilities of the global supply chain?
They never end.
Yeah, this is true.
No, right. Well, we had, how many ships piled up in California waiting to get in the port, like 50 or 75. It was a crazy number. Well, okay, that all at Long Beach. And all that stopped. But now you have at Suez, you have the drought going on, so they can't move as many. And then you have the thing, going out in the Middle East where they're having to reroute and go all the way around, Africa. So it's always something. So disruption is just part of it. And when you're thinking about a global supply chain, you have to take that into account, and have backup plans and risk management going on. So, agility is a key word.
So which one of these is so where do you get besides experience, because we know that is our greatest friend. But like in your strategic planning and in the risk management, I think that might be one of the biggest things. Is it's not a if it happens, it's when it happens. So where do you see the greatest value for them to understand how to assess that and predict it to the best of their ability, and more importantly, prepare themselves?
Well, it's something that's an ongoing process always, and you'll learn about in this class rating systems, the probability that it will happen, and also probability of impact, or how much impact does it have. So you have a methodology to determine which ones are most important, so you could focus mostly on those. So you could work out contingency plans and backup plans on those. It's almost like a Pareto kind of thinking, where you would focus in on the most important aspects. There's no way you can cover them all. You just there's no way. But agility is really important to keep in mind with that. How can you remain agile and like it's another word won't pop in my head, but you have to have backup plans, plan B, plan C.
You got to know how to pivot.
You got to know how to pivot.
What does a normal or an average backup plan look like?
Well, that's a broad, it would be specific to whatever it is that you're doing. For example, in my procurement position previously, I dealt with stainless steel. Okay, and that was one of the things I looked at. In Odukampu and Mobile, that's where it came from. Of course, you have North American Stainless in Kentucky, in various mills around. Well, when COVID hit, we had allocations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when your main sources, all of a sudden, okay, they're on allocation. Well, we just sold the biggest job we've ever sold, and we're way outside of what the allocation is going to be. So you have to have multiple, where you would normally have trusted supply partners, strategic partners. You would have to step outside of that to make sure that you could cover the demand, in a different way.
Right. So how does a company go about finding the best supplier or suppliers?
I have a little bit different philosophy with that. There's a couple of different styles. There's some that are just totally price oriented. They're going to beat you to death. That they want the bottom dollar no matter what. In the work that I did, I was more relationship based, and I'll tell you why. I always felt like you should treat your strategic suppliers like customers.
Mm-hmm.
And if you take care of them, they may not be the cheapest, but when the chips are down, you're going to be able to depend on them to do the right thing and to help you. And with the steel shortage that happened due to COVID, our supplier had to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They had to cut out people that they were selling to that weren't buying as much. They took care of us. So I believe in the relationship side of that, in the sustainability thinking or long-term thinking. That's going to get you down the road more than saving 2 cents a pound.
We have a program that we offer at ATN, a software program that allows suppliers, manufacturers to source out their suppliers only in the United States. I think that's been an issue, is that for us to be so technologically savvy and have AI, and for me to type out an email and tell it to write it where I sound so intelligent. It just makes me so happy. But to have all of that, we don't even know what's going on in our backyard, where our heads are so focused into basically our bones, our heads are down, right, that we don't look around us. And so this software program helps connect those suppliers and lets you go. But it also has, and you've hit on this, and so I'm really interested in showing you what it looks like, but it has a visualization component where you can identify your suppliers on a rating scale. Just like what you described, I was like, it's like he knows. It was amazing. It's a rating scale that shows you potential vulnerabilities. I mean, obviously none of us know, and what one person might consider, I guess that's the other thing, is what one supplier might consider, or what one manufacturer might consider a vulnerability, another manufacturer doesn't see that as a vulnerability with that supplier. So it allows for you to kind of see that there might be a potential and then do what you do, which is, to me, the most important. I agree with you, relationships. It's all about relationships. And that's a key thing. Do you see that being beneficial is where they can lay out, or is that in any of these certifications where they lay out, not necessarily certifications, but in the teaching process, laying out a visualization of a supply chain, mapping it out, like truly, not just, well, I know these are our suppliers, but truly put it on paper, put it on a whiteboard, put it on a computer, whatever, and really map that out of what it looks like?
Well, there's certainly scorecards that you can do that track deliveries, quality, and assessments and certifications with suppliers, if you want to do that on a formal basis, and you learn about that in this training.
Yeah, I didn't think about certifications. You've got certain certifications that are required per industry, and you have to get those there.
That's probably the easiest way to do that. And you can make up your own version of that, depending on what business you're doing and what's important to you, because like you said, each business is individual. What's important to you, the voice of customer, even, from that kind of a thinking, what's important to you, and you can custom make that certification scorecard to fit what you want.
And I think it's really important that we hit home. Alabama is predominantly rural, even no matter how bad anyone wants to say that it's not. We still are, which means that we have a lot of large manufacturers, but we have a lot of small and medium manufacturers. And supply chain, strategic planning, and all of this isn't just for somebody that's 1,000 employees. Wouldn't you think this is pretty important for the guy that just has 15 employees as well?
I did this company because I believe that very thing.
Okay, well, tell me some more about that.
Well, I have a lot of friends that work at larger companies that I'm grateful and fortunate to be able to have many long conversations about business or whatever. And there are so many companies that need that. It's easier, I think, to incorporate this thinking in a smaller company, because if you can get that foundation going the right way in the beginning, it really sets them up. So a lot of when you get in, you didn't ask about CTSC yet, but there are TLP programs and consultant programs with ASCM that are focused on really large organizations, and rightly so. They've been doing that a long, long time, and it helps them, and it's structured for that. I believe there are many, many companies, 25, 50, 100 people that could use just going through, just having conversations about strategic planning and culture and getting all that, and in processes and in understanding how important that is for all that to be tied together in the right way. That really sets a foundation for growth and inclusion. It just covers all the boxes. So yes, that's what I hope for, because I haven't been doing consulting for 30 years, and I don't have 15 degrees and certifications. But there's so many, they don't need that. They just need plain spoken common sense and how things should work and how things should tie together, coming from a body of knowledge that's proven and available.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that small to medium manufacturers need to understand is, you said on time and full, which I think is what most people operate by. But if you're small to medium and you're just there, understanding how to mitigate, do you feel like that's something? Mitigation on a larger concept and mitigation in a smaller concepts, I would think, are two totally different types of mitigations.
Well, maybe so. but they're trying to accomplish the same thing.
Okay.
I would argue, I mean, obviously they're different, but I would argue really these structures and processes and all this body of knowledge, it doesn't matter the size. It applies the same whether you're 10 people or 10,000.
That's true. But getting the ones that are the smaller bodies to realize that these are the processes that could be implemented could be, I mean, so much so to save their company if something potentially happens.
I would refer to, there's a huge movement, and I'm sure you guys are hearing it, about sustainability and ESG and all the reporting with CO2 footprint, all this stuff that's coming up. And I hear my colleagues talk about, and they're talking about the giant companies. Well, if you're really doing that, then you must talk to the small companies as well, because they probably make up 90%, don't quote that number, but it's a large majority of businesses are small. And if you wanted to make a difference in sustainability and that line of thinking, you really need to be including those guys too. I think a lot of attention gets put on the big guys when we really should be thinking about a more grassroots kind of thing.
It is a grassroots. It's where we find most of our suppliers. The big guys have to have, 1, 2, and 3 tier suppliers, and those are coming from the smaller guys. So if you had to say, these are my top 5 things in supply chain that if you're a company, you come in and I get the strategic plan and you do the analysis, but we are going to focus on 5 key components. What are those? Or 3, if you don't have 5.
Uncomfortable
narrow it
with
down.
5. Well, again, nothing works without alignment, and alignment doesn't happen unless the previously discussed, strategy, vision, mission, values has to be in place, and your people have to be in place. They have to feel part of what you're doing and included in what you're doing, your team. Then you can apply a balanced scorecard to that, and I think that's a great way to kind of tie it all together, because there's KPIs and things that go along when you start talking about that. And a balanced scorecard is, customer value, business practices, innovation and learning for the staff, and financial performance. You can't forget that. So you're covering all those things. So I would say if you did those 3 things and focused on those, you're really setting yourself up for success.
Well, Gene, it has been a pleasure. We appreciate you being with us today. And we just can't thank you enough. Tell everybody what's the best way to contact you if they need to.
Well, ProAdvanceLLC.com would be the best way, and there's information there, and you can reach me there through email and a form or whatever. That'd be the best way to get me.
Thanks so much, Gene, and thanks again for listening to Alabama Manufacturing Now and watching us. And make sure to like, subscribe, and follow on all of our podcast platforms. See you next time.